Today is for you if you've looked at your grocery receipt lately and you've wondered, wow, how did it climb so high? This is the Power of After Show. We help you at mid-career, halftime of life, help you to answer what's next. And part of that is how you are able to survive in a society that's kind of changing. And today's also for you if you feel financially responsible, but yet you're a little unsettled in a world where prices continue to fluctuate. And if you're asking maybe what's new and what's changing and how do I build real financial stability in this season of fluctuating prices, as well as maybe some of the things that are happening politically and in the financial market, well, today's a good time to take away some of that fear. Today, I have Greg joining me, my husband joining me, who was a former RIA, who's able to answer some of those questions. And in an inflationary society, stability doesn't just come from wishful thinking. It comes from clarity, from strategy, and wise adjustments. And so this episode is all about some of those practical shifts that you can make now to protect your income, strengthening your foundation, and moving from just being reactive to really being resilient. So stay tuned. You've spent years building what matters. Now, with Power of After courses and elite mentorship, it's time to move forward with intention and impact. This is the Power of After Show. Let's get started. Well, hello. It's great to have Greg with me today. Thank you for joining me.
Sure.
And
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, I've already done a little bit of an intro about today. And basically, I'd like to take away some of the fear of what's happening right now, especially when people are at this stage of life. Maybe they've thought about, maybe scaling down on some work or retiring or doing something different, reinventing their life a little bit, but they're going, okay, how am I going to survive? What's going on? And so I'd like to talk a little bit about the definition of inflation. And I'm bringing Greg on. In fact, this could be like a whole series because there's a lot we could talk about today. But we're going to hit a couple main points, and we'll do some more of these. But we're going to talk about what does inflation actually mean, and how is that it playing into today's society.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah, it's a good.
All right. So apparently, a lot of people are worried about inflation, and they've seen egg prices go up, gasoline prices go up, prices of flights go up.
Big time.
So, and I guess if you're still renting, rents have gone up. So, quickly to talk about inflation as opposed to some of those price increases. The easiest way to understand this is that inflation always is caused by government spending too much money. And the difference between what they bring in tax revenues and what they spend, that difference is made up through borrowing. And that borrowing causes the value of the dollar go down. And whatever amount the dollar of the value goes down is how much inflation goes up. Mm-hmm. That's simple inflation. All the other stuff about inflation, whether we're talking about food prices, gas prices, rent prices, everything else, is more of a supply and demand issue than it is inflation. And if you want a good discussion on that, Google or go to Grok AI and look up Milton Friedman discussing inflation. And he's got a number of videos. Friedman was a great economist back in the turn of the century, the 2000s, and he'll explain it in detail. But that's it. So flip side. So what causes all the other prices to go up? And I used to explain this all the time as an investment advisor. As you start to build your investments, you got to understand at the bottom is stuff. And the formal word for that is called commodities.
Mhm.
So there's land, there's homes, there's energy, there's industrial metals, there's gold,
Mhm.
and there's different essential food stocks, corn, wheat, soybeans, those kinds of things.
Mm.
All of that is working in a supply and demand state. And, food's always going to be influenced by weather. Um, the cost of food can be impacted by the transportation cost caused by energy prices. Energy prices are solely an issue of supply and demand. Have people producing energy cut back? Are they adding more production? Um, right now we're in a flux because AI data centers are requiring more electricity. So in some areas, uh, short-term electrical prices may or may not go up, but it would be solely because of a supply problem. There's not enough supply currently. But the Trump administration's cut regulations. They've got like 100 nuclear power plants
Mhm.
coming online in the next 3 to 5 years. A number of the big data places like Meta, Google are creating their own nuclear power plants to
Hmm.
produce enough electricity to run not only their data, but to provide electricity to the surrounding area. So those are supply kinds of issues that impact us. Back when egg prices were going up, a lot of that was because the government had caused shortages in energy, which had caused energy prices to go up. So the cost of transporting, eggs and poultry had gone up. At the same time, we got hit with um, food costs had gone up, and there had been a disease in poultry. So there was less chickens producing eggs. All of that happened at the same time, which caused eggs to go up.
Right.
And when you reduce the cost of getting the eggs to market by reducing energy cost, as you bring food supplies back online, and as the chickens get healthy, um, egg prices come down. So understanding if you can search out if you feel like beef is too much,
Mm.
just go to AI, ask the question, what's causing the recent price in beef?
Mm.
And currently, there was couple of years ago a disease that hit a lot of herds, and so the herds had to be culled. So there's less meat, and we're all fighting for the same amount of meat. So prices have gone up; they're going to come back down. So inflation's produced by the government borrowing too much money, and the difference between what they brought in and what they borrowed in percentages is what causes inflation to go up.
Mm.
All of the other stuff is supply and demand prices or pressures on commodities.
Mm.
So if the price of an airline ticket goes up, what goes into the price of an airline ticket? Well, fuel,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Second, labor. Um,
Yes.
if you have enough pilots
Mhm.
to run, all the flights that you want to have,
Mhm.
prices will be down a little bit.
Right.
If you have a shortage of pilots, then there's only so many flights you can run,
Right.
which means that the price of flights is going to go up. And if the price of labor goes up because of union negotiations or just
Mm.
whatever, that adds to the cost of flights going up. So, all of those things are involved.
Mhm.
And I would imagine flights are going to start coming down because energy prices, both jet fuel and electric costs are going to come down. And we should be in for a decade of much more reasonable flights. So that's the inflation issue. Hopefully that helps you with regards to inflation. Inflation is not going to be 70s inflation anytime soon.
Uh-huh. I was very excited to hear about flights coming down because every time I'm booking a flight, it's like, oh, it's just even more. and our kids, we travel to see a couple of our kids, so as well as other work and everything else that we're doing. So yeah, it's that should be encouraging to many, and also some of the wages are going up, and not artificially. They're going up because of skills and because of some of the jobs that are created. I mean, I just read about some of the businesses. I guess Apple, they're making they have a bunch of new jobs coming in, and so at this point, as we're recording this, and so a lot of times those jobs are well paying, and so
Oh
you've
yeah.
got yeah.
Right.
So there are some of those things involved in this. So, but that really does, it's fun for me to ask that question because like the way you explain it is it really is. It totally makes sense because people do panic about it. They're going, why is this? Who's making? Is it the grocers? Is it the and we know that is not the case. There's very very little margin for groceries, very little. They work on a tiny little
Yeah.
margin. You used to work, Greg worked for Campbell Soup Company and for Swanson's and all that, and you know how little margin there is in that. And so they are dependent on so many other things in the whole transportation, in the supply, all of that. So all of that has a direct impact on that inflation. So,
Right.
and we're all looking forward to hopefully some of those prices going down.
Yeah, and somebody could, yell fire and try to get you to panic about inflation, government spending. But the current administration is committed to three threes: lower than 3% inflation. So they're going to keep pushing government cuts so that inflation doesn't go any higher. They're trying to get 3% interest rates.
Wow.
Whether they'll get there or not,
Wow.
I don't know. And then they only want the debt to be 3% of GDP.
Wow.
So it's a three-legged stool that really puts constraints on government spending, which will in turn put restraints on inflation. And that's a good commitment. It should help us all relax a little bit.
And I just have to affirm you are you are studying the market every single day, and you have some major people that I I would probably get lost on, but really following a lot of these trends and a lot of the regulations as well. And so you've understood, you've been in this for a very long time. And from the tax aspect, you've from all aspects of this. So it's just hearing some of the information about what it is helps us calm down and
Right.
know, and also what some of the guidelines are, whether or not we'll get there. I mean, if interest rates came down that much, that would be amazing. In fact, amazing. But I don't know if they'll ever get down that far again. But well, let's talk about spending, because there's an awareness to our spending intentionally, with the intentionality of spending. And we've talked about this quite a bit on what some of the major costs go to. And especially, usually we don't speak with this podcast, not as many of those young couples that are just coming up, or just, some of that sort of advice. But it's really, your advice on this is good for any stage of life on how much people are spending in different areas, whether it's the car, whether it's the house, or and how do you more intentionally spend at this point?
Yeah. And so as we get into midlife and as we start to move on, it's important to keep track how much debt we're taking on. And the normal reason we would take on consumer debt is because our monthly expenses are higher than our income. And if you just do a 6-month, add up all of your income for 6 months, put it on one side of the paper, add up every expense, both from your checkbook, from your debit account, and from your credit card. Add them all up. And if you want to, categorize them, but not necessary. Just add them all up. And if you earned $100,000 in 6 months and you spent $110,000 and you notice that your credit card revolving credit is $10,000, that's pretty much how you got there. And you won't be off very, very much. Don't forget to throw in cash expenses. But and then the next question is, well, what am I spending, money on? And generally speaking, there's usually monthly spending creep that sneaks in.
Oh, I like that. Monthly spending creep.
Yeah, and
Okay, what's that?
so the first thing probably is a car payment. Your last car payment was, let's say $500, and now you've got a $570 payment. So you're 70 a month times 12 months. You're, what is that? 1,040 more than you were spending the year before, and you're still just driving.
Yeah.
And so that car, too much car is generally, a big thing. I'd usually go back to too much house, but once the house is bought, you've got a permanent dilemma.
Yeah.
But most people get in trouble because of too much house or rent and too much cars. And then after that, it's things like gym memberships and
interesting.
Eating out. The eating out creep. If you would measure, every dollar. So dinners, lunches, coffees, breakfasts. Every time you did that, and you compare it to 2 years ago, there's a good chance that if you're finding yourself sweating monthly, you're probably $400 or $500 a month more in outside eating than you were 2 years ago. Just a guess. So too much car, too much eating, and then the the next one would be insurance. I always told people not to date their insurance broker because every year, or at least every 2 years, you should shop your insurance. House or fire and flood insurance, car insurance, health insurance. Your life insurance isn't going to change, so you don't have to worry about that. But the other ones, you should shop and just make sure that because a lot of times a new company, in order to get new clients, if you happen to fit their profile, what kind of client they're looking for, will offer you a great discount if you bundle the house and auto.
Okay.
And if you're in California, the earthquake. So, just don't date your insurance. So you can save another $500 a month probably just on insurance costs. Then, if you got an iPhone, you can go on your iPhone under General, go under Apps, and you can see all the apps that you've got, and you can also measure which ones you're paying money for, and do you really need to keep paying money for those? So again, you can find $70, $80 a month sometimes on an app you haven't used in 3 years. So keep those things in mind. It's just spending creep. And, if all of that money's going back in your pocket, we can all breathe a little bit easier. Something to think about is, let's say 500 a month, we can find in savings. In order to keep 500 a month, if you're paying, any kind of reasonable amount of taxes, you have to make 700 in order to keep 500. And, for some people, you got to make 1,000 to keep 500. So the take home is a lot different than the income. So keep that in mind too. How much do I have to make to actually spend this money? And you'll be surprised.
Wow.
So, easiest way to do that, most tax returns anymore will show you your effective tax rate. Just, if you got a 20% effective tax rate. You divide whatever amount by 20% and you end up what you'd end up having. So anyway.
Really a great, so many great nuggets out of that. Great. I call that also subscription poor. And right now with the SaaS programs where you have monthly payments and, some of those need to go back. I do this very often. I go back and say, do I really need this? And I've tried to, cut a lot of those out and get just a lifetime deal or do something that I don't have those monthly payments. There's a couple I do, but that just the programs work so well. This is one where I record on Zoom because Zoom had the great advantage of going through a shutdown and they were able to really beef up their program. And so it's kind of fail safe in many respects. I've tried some other programs and it's not quite there yet. So, which I'd love to, again, get rid of a yearly, subscription fee. But so there's certain things that you have to have still, but you can still go through a lot of those and not be subscription poor. And
so I'm not going to name names, but our kids every now and then drop, something that they're subscribing to. And it's like, Debbie's in a different category. She's got a thriving business. I have a Microsoft Office subscription. I pay $4 a month for Croc Step Up, and I pay some minimal amount for my Apple iPhone. That's it, and I can probably afford a lot more subscriptions than many of the people that are buying a lot more subscriptions. And it's just weird. People in their 30s and 40s, how willing they are to keep amping up their monthly payment. You tell them that's only $50 a month. They go, oh, that's nothing. But if you get 12 of those, it's $600 a month.
Exactly.
So, and remember, that's after taxes. That's your take home. So you got to make $900, $1,000 in order to spend $600. Yeah. So just be careful.
Yes, and that's that intentionality. Yeah. I think it's so important to evaluate, and and that's something I didn't spend as much time. I wish I had learned this principle early. Of course, I've worked in the arts for so long, but we weren't taught as much about this business part because it was a gig economy. But really going back and evaluating all of these areas consistently has the data and all of the numbers are just very, very important because it gives you freedom in moving forward. Yep. It just gives you a lot more freedom. So let's just hit one more little topic because again, there's a whole list that we could go through. So we will end up doing a few more of these in another couple months. Maybe we'll do another one, but on this particular topic. But I'm going to talk about, because this takes away a little bit of that fear as well, of the diversification in midlife, at the halftime of life, and what diversification actually means and how important that is for us.
Okay. So, we talked about the savings. If you're midlife or in retirement, you got to figure out, how do I make money on the money I've saved?
Right.
And generally speaking, I always start with the NASDAQ 100. And if you own something called QQQ, you own the top 100 stocks on the NASDAQ. And it's got X amount of risk. And it's got, a 20-year track record of really good returns. But, you got to endure a 20-25%, volatility every 5 years or something. So,
yes.
So the way you would throttle that risk down a little bit is one, pay off your house. Once your house is paid off, let's say you had a $4,000 mortgage. With a $4,000 mortgage, that's $48,000. We'll call it $50,000 a year. That you can come up with after taxes, right? So, it was $70,000 or $80,000 you had to make in order to keep the 50 to pay that off. So, once you pay off the house, just follow this.
Mhm.
You no longer have to make $70,000 or $80,000 a year.
Mm.
That's all gone.
Yeah.
You've got complete peace of mind.
Mhm.
Now, that ends up being the most conservative part of your portfolio.
Mhm.
So, you've just, given yourself like a $70,000 a year pension
Yeah.
for the rest of you and your spouse's life.
Mm.
Okay.
Mhm.
So let's say I have my house paid off and I own QQQ. I
Mhm.
got stock market. This is still too much volatility. There's a wide range of dividend paying things that you would purchase to throttle that down, that have very little up and down, but pay a steady stream of income.
Mhm.
And if you start compounding the dividends,
Mhm.
you can use the rule of 72 to figure out how long it would take you to double your money.
Okay.
So if at 8%, it would take you 8 and the 72's 9. Take you 9 years to double your money.
Okay.
At 12%, it would take you 6 years. 12 and the 72's 6.
Mm.
So, and if you reinvest dividends in which you're making 12%, you'll double your money in 6 years.
Mm.
And for a lot of people, 12% is more than adequate.
Mhm.
They don't have any volatility, especially if you can go 2 or 3 years without a market downturn at 12% and reinvested all of the dividends, and then you have a market downturn. It's going to be steep, but you won't come anywhere close to getting to touching your principal. You'll
Mm.
be so far ahead. So, how do you do that? Well, so there's ETFs that invest in real estate.
Mhm.
There's multiple limited partnerships and ETFs that invest in energy.
Mhm.
Um, and the real estate ones generally pay, you can get them, around 8, 9%.
Mhm.
And you end up owning, um, a complete portfolio of real estate around the nation and
Mm.
all, not just apartments, but medical buildings,
Mhm.
resorts,
Mhm.
casinos,
Mm.
golf
Mm.
courses.
Mm.
I think I mentioned medical buildings, nursing home centers. I mean, it's a complete diversified portfolio of
Mhm.
real estate that you can own.
Mhm.
The second energy, and energy anymore is monies that are made of oil,
Mm.
gas, electrical utilities, and soon nuclear. So, that is worthwhile. Another thing that sometimes gets thrown in is what we call infrastructure. And infrastructure is the moving of things like data, um, electricity, oil and gas, pipelines. Those things work like toll roads, and you get paid to just collect tolls
Mm.
on all of that. And again, reinvest the dividends. So I said energy, real estate. Um, there's a new group of funds that use they sell options on the stock market, and they're paying 10%.
Mm.
And a little bit more volatility, but again, reinvest the dividends. And two of them might have you look up. One's called QQQI, and another one's called SPYI.
Mm.
Now, one's on the S&P 500, the other's on the Nasdaq.
Mm.
And just go back over 5 years, look at the volatility, see if it's something you can live with. Look at the increase in dividends, see if that's something that you would enjoy. Speaking of increasing dividends, do an AI search on, Grok. Give me the top 10 companies that have grown their dividends the most over the last 10 years.
Mm.
Somewhere in there, you'll find Duke Energy, and somewhere in there, you're going to find Waste Management. Um, and the yields on those are more like 3 or 4%.
Mhm.
But the thing is if you've got a 30-year time horizon and they're increasing their dividend every year, that 3 or 4% is going to be, before too long, 8% on your original investment,
Mhm.
and the price is going to go up.
Mhm.
So that's a worthwhile thing to look at.
Mm.
So those are just some ideas. Another one. Look at mutual funds that own international bonds. You know, Nuremberger is probably one. Can't remember the others, but you can own a portfolio of other countries' bonds, which are priced much higher than ours, being professionally managed. So you and I don't have time to keep track of the global markets. So you pay a little guy, a small fee, and he pays you, 7 or 8%, and it gives you diversification outside the country. So those are some good ideas. And what you do is you're reinvesting those dividends every year, and it's taking the bottom out of whatever stock market exposure you have. So if you've got your ass paid off, you got a nice dividend paying portfolio that's paying you, 8 to 10%, and it's growing, compounding, it's doubling, every not 8 to 9 years. You can withstand more volatility in your stock portfolio. So,
wow.
Was that too much?
Oh, I think there's going to be people following this go, oh, I need to write these notes. I need to read. Like, there is an article that goes with this. Actually, it will be probably the addition of some other articles that I'll give you a download on it, free download. So look for the link of that into the podcast notes here, and you will get that direct link. And so I will put some of those resources down so that people can click right to it.
Sure.
But I think in reviewing this, we've talked about inflation. Meeting that inflation really without fear. When we understand what it is, we can take away some of the fear.
Yeah.
When you understand the background of it a little bit. And then that intentional spending, really going through a lot of what you are actually spending money on. And I think you've helped so many people through their looking at all of their expenses. And I mean, we have adult kids. You still work with our kids at time to time. You're sitting down with it. Let's figure this out. You want to buy this house? Let's figure this out. You want to buy this car? You better figure this out.
Right.
And so you go through all of those numbers again. So if you are at our stage and you even have kids at that stage, it's not only important to do for your personal finances, but also you've got a whole other generation you're working with. And then some of that diversification that might have made your eyes cross a little bit, which of course mine always usually does. But it's good to have maybe some of those QQQI and SPYI. I'm going to put those down. You can do a search these days. In fact, that information right now is at your fingertips.
Yep.
So you can put all of that in. I use more of the Chat GPT. You use more of Grok. There's so many.
A good search engine is Yahoo Finance.
Oh, good.
So that's a good place to go look up
good,
stuff.
Good. And as I said, you're on this every day, and you're watching a lot of the current, videos, everything out. Really from the main financial market of what's going on. And I think that's a really important thing. So I think I want to leave everybody with just saying, find one thing out of what was said today that you can really apply. I think that's what would be the one thing that would be best. That's a thinking pose. I like that.
You asked me to come on one thing.
I mean, where do you even start with this? But I think, there's a lot to think about today. So if you are a listener, figuring out, there's always little things you can shave. Always there's a little something.
The one thing I do is go to your write-up and peruse it.
Yes. and do a little bit more. Yes.
Get it in your hands and circle it.
Yes. And make sure that you're getting also our weekly updates. All of our articles come out. Get a lot of the notices and a lot of extra downloads and links all the way through there with our newsletter, goalsforyourlife.com/newsletter. And if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you're not going to miss anything. We do live streams. Everything's going on with this. So, yes. Well, thank you so much. What a great topic. I felt like this was an important one to do together. You can see why. I got to just kind of ask you a question and, hey, it went on and on. So it was great. Wonderful. I always learn something. And this is not my field, but I've had to run the business too. And I understand a lot of this, and doing my little calculations. So thanks so much for joining us, for everyone. And we'll look
Good to
forward.
be with you guys.
Yes. And we will look forward to being with you again next time. So bye-bye for now.
Bye.
Thanks so much for spending time with me today. I love bringing you insights to help you maximize your skills, resources, and experience at mid-career and beyond, so that you can make your next chapter your most impactful and purposeful yet. I'm Deborah Johnson, and I can't wait to be with you again next time on the Power of After Show.